Next year, in 2026, Halo crosses a groundbreaking milestone. It becomes a quarter of a century old. 25 years. And during that time, we've seen the narrative and the story of the Halo universe grow at an exponential rate. We've gone from being a relatively indescript cyborg and the last of his kind, trudging along the surface of a mysterious ring world, fighting a war against an alien conglomerate that we were ultimately losing, only to find an ancient threat buried on the ring, older and more dangerous than we could possibly have realised, to now having a fully expanded narrative and origin story of the Master Chief Spartan John 117. We know the history and origins of the Covenant, the mysterious race that created the ring worlds. We now know almost all intimate details about them as well. We know how the war between humanity and the Covenant got started. We know the strange connections between the Flood and the creators of our species and many others, the precursors, as well as the lives and exploits of hundreds of individuals across hundreds of thousands of years. I, as with many of us, have been deeply entrenched in the Halo universe for well over 2 decades. And during that time, I've watched the Halo universe expand exponentially. And I've endeavoured to try to understand that expansion, to come to terms with how things have evolved and changed in the Halo universe. And since Halo has passed through the hands of 3 different game studios and hundreds of creative individuals, it's not surprising that occasionally inconsistencies and contradictions are introduced into the narrative. And one of the most enjoyable aspects of what I do on my day-to-day is try to remedy those contradictions, to find ways to explain how one thing can lead to another and bridge the gap of logic between. And now I'm going to present a framework to you that not only fixes many of the contradictions and inconsistencies in Halo's past, but becomes a predictive model for the future of the Halo universe. And the more that you think on it and apply it to the Halo universe, the more it fixes. I'm about to present to you the grand unified theory of Halo's cosmology. This is the Halo theory of everything. Hey everyone, welcome back to Installation 00, and this is going to be a hell of a project. I have fully laid out the grand unified theory of Halo's cosmology. This is a defining fundamental framework that clearly defines and lays out the fundamental basis of the Halo universe, upon which everything that we see in all of the games, all of the books, all of the extended media can be built and explained. The Halo universe has a common history with our real-world history from around 100,000 years ago to the modern day. Everything that happens after the modern day is built upon and extrapolated from the fundamentals of what we already understand about the universe, with some narrative expansions and drama and space opera thrown in for good measure. And everything that happened before 100,000 years ago is almost a retelling or a reimagination of humanity's origin story. Although, if you dig deep enough into some of the conspiracy theories surrounding ancient human cultures, you might find there's actually more in common than you might think. But moving away from that, our understanding of the modern-day universe is based upon scientific consensus. Theories, frameworks, calculations are presented, tested and peer-reviewed, and, if it holds water, eventually come to underpin and define our understanding of the universe. And of course, the holy grail of those discoveries would be the theory of everything, something that the late Professor Stephen Hawking spent his life chasing, and unfortunately never quite got to see it. The theory of everything, also known as the unified field theory, or the ideas of bringing together the theories of the very big and the very small, is a physics framework that aims to describe all fundamental forces and elementary particles within a single, comprehensive framework. It seeks to explain and understand how the four known fundamental forces of gravity, electromagnetism, and the strong and weak nuclear forces interact and potentially arise from a single underlying field. Essentially, it's a theory to attempt to unify these forces into a single, overarching concept. And in my recent dives into the deep lore of the Halo universe for some of my more popular videos recently, I came across some interesting bits of information and deep lore that seemed to allow for a specific framework to arise within the Halo universe that becomes the Halo's equivalent of the unified field theory, what I'm calling the grand unified theory of Halo's cosmology. And from it, I've managed to explain some of the major contradictions and inconsistencies surrounding the flood, consciousness permanence, the precursors, neural physics, ancient humanity, and the forerunners. This unified theory has become a framework upon which the entire Halo universe can be built upon. It explains so much, and the more inconsistencies I find in the deep lore, the more this theory proves to be accurate. But of course, this is such an immense subject that I'm going to have to break this down into several parts. And if there's demand, I'll release a supercut of all of it at the end. So starting today, there's going to be a series of 6 videos that will outline this grand unified theory of Halo's cosmology. So now we will tackle the fundamental framework that underpins the Halo universe, what I'm calling the cosmological layer model. Then we will move on to the other respective pieces of this thesis, being the nature of neural physics, the Forerunner's sphere workaround, ancient humanity, the lost rival, the true nature of the flood, and the bias fallacy. And at the conclusion of all 6 parts, you will have a clear and complete picture of Halo's cosmology, at which point I effectively submit it to you for peer review. And if it holds water, it could become the fundamental theory beneath the entire Halo universe and become a predictive model for the future. At its core, Halo's reality operates across several stacked or nested layers. These layers represent increasing levels of abstraction, control, and fundamental priority. The deeper you go, the closer you get to modifying not just the contents of reality, but the operating principles of reality itself. Layer 0, the source field, also known as the axiomatic substrate. To parallel the real world, this layer is the most fundamental. This is where the quantum foam, the zero-point energy field, the vacuum energy, it is the underlying field of energy upon which the entire Halo universe can be built. It, just as its real-world analogue, is a Planck-scale substrate. In our real world, there are 4 fundamental forces that exist, that explain and define all of reality. Of those, we have discovered a fundamental force-carrying particle for 3 of them. The photon is the force-carrying particle for the electromagnetic force. The gluon is the force-carrying particle for the strong nuclear force. The W and Z bosons are the force-carrying particles for the weak nuclear force. And to date, gravity continues to elude us. And it really is with gravity where our real-world physics finds its problem. We haven't found the quantum of gravity. There are of course ideas and hypotheses in conventional physics and quantum physics to try to explain gravity, but until such time as we actually know, we cannot develop a theory of everything for the real world. However, in the Halo universe, it seems abundantly clear that gravity does have a force-carrying particle, a hypothesized real-world particle known as the graviton. It's worth noting that there's a possibility that the graviton may exist in the real world. We just haven't discovered it yet because, after all, gravity is the weakest of the fundamental forces, and thus requires exponentially larger machines and detection gear to find something like the graviton. But to give you an idea of just how powerful of a discovery finding the graviton would be, and how powerful it is in the Halo universe, when humanity came to understand the electromagnetic force and the photon, humanity went from candlelight and wood fires to our current real-world civilization with electricity and cars and lights, and the internet, jet airplanes, a space program, and the borderlines of fusion energy in just 200 years. Mankind had been making very slow and gradual progress for 100,000 years, and just in the last 2 centuries has skyrocketed to the civilization you see when you look outside of your window, all from understanding and harnessing the power of the photon. If we were to discover the graviton, we would be able to turn gravity on and off in a location with the flip of a switch. We'd be able to convert energy directly into gravity gradients, and that could pave the way for technical innovations beyond imagining. In the Halo universe, all 4 fundamental forces are quantized. Gluons for the strong force, photons for the electromagnetic force, W and Z bosons for the weak force, and the graviton all exist in a single unified field. This is the source field, the true canvas on which reality is written. Pure potential energy fluctuations, quantum fluctuations, foundational constants, the machine code or firmware of existence. Nothing recognizable exists here, really. It's raw information and energy. It's the battery of the universe. Everything that is possible emerges from this substrate. All of space-time has a quanta. Layer 1 is the neural physics layer. Neural physics is a concept in science championed by the precursors, which posits that the entire universe is alive, but in a manner in which normal life cannot comprehend it. It encompasses all of consciousness, life, matter, and energy in the universe, and that all of those could be harnessed and manipulated through the principles and near transcendent technology of neural physics. It parallels real-world theories and hypotheses surrounding emergent consciousness theories. The idea that consciousness, or the capacity for subjective experience, arises from the complex interactions of a system rather than being a property of its individual components. Panpsychism, a doctrine or belief that everything material, however small, has an element of individual consciousness, even if it doesn't objectively display it. The Penrose-Hameroff quantum consciousness model, which proposes that consciousness arises from quantum processes within microtubules in brain neuron, suggesting that these processes, specifically the collapse of quantum states, are orchestrated by gravitational forces and lead to conscious experiences. And living time models, also known as temporal holism, being the idea that time may be more fluid and interconnected than we typically perceive it, and suggests that experience can exist outside of the usual temporal sequence, and that the present moment is not just a snapshot in a linear progression, but a point of connection to all of time. At its most fundamental, the neural physics layer is the emergence of universal patterns that govern reality's rules, the laws of physics, the constants, the causalities. Consciousness may not emerge within this layer, but rather is this layer. The idea that the universe itself is alive, but in a manner we cannot perceive it. Living time, being time as a stateful property of pattern interaction rather than simple entropy. And when interacting with the neural physics layer, will and intent can manipulate this layer directly, which adversely affect true reality. A simplified concept being that the neural physics layer is the software layer of existence, where informational structures define what reality can be, and conscious will operates here. The suggestion from the precursors being that this living consciousness of the universe is where all conscious beings pull their consciousness from. It's where consciousness originates, and it's where consciousness returns when the physical dies. It is the before and afterlife. It is the creator. It is, in its simplest sense, God, unspoiled and independent of the machinations of man, beast, or indeed alien. The precursor's mastery of neural physics as a technology and science concept, and thus their interaction with the neural physics layer, meant they were effectively at one with the universe. It is why time, entropy, birth and death were inconsequential to the precursors, because they knew that physical death didn't mean true, permanent consciousness death. It simply meant that they returned to the neural physics layer, to the universal consciousness, and since the neural physical layer underpins all of reality, they could will themselves back into existence. The neural physics layer rests on top of the source field, and the source field's incredible energy is siphoned through to the neural physics layer, with the neural physics layer itself giving rise to the universal patterns that govern reality's rules, and ultimately gives rise to the next layer. Layer 2 is the dimensional control layer. The closest real-world analogues are simply higher dimensions, string theory, M-theory's 10 and 11 dimensions of space, brain cosmology, the 4th, 5th and 6th dimensions and beyond. Hyperdimensionality. Basically the idea that our experience of the universe is 3 spatial dimensions and 1 temporal dimension. Combined means we live in a 4-dimensional universe, 3 dimensions in 1 direction of time. But the true reality is made of lots of dimensions above our conceptual understanding. There are many different interpretations of what these dimensions are, with some saying that they are compact or curled up, rendering them undetectable to us, with others referencing that it is a space between spaces. All that is common among all of them is that we lack the physical capability to accurately perceive them. The Forerunners were masters of the dimensional control layer. They were masters of slipstream space. This is, in the Halo universe, the hyperdimensional planes of reality. With their mastery of slipspace control, the Forerunners could control geometric structures of space-time itself, and allowed the manipulation of time dilation, stasis, non-linear travel, and relative causal isolation. Access to hyperdimensional transit routes, also known as slipspace translocation. From the Forerunners' mastery of the dimensional control layer, they were able to create shield worlds that not only had the radius of 1 astronomical unit, being the distance between Earth and the Sun, but were able to enclose that megastructure into a slipspace rift that in normal space meant that it only occupied the space of a few square meters, whilst also enabling time within this slipspace field to travel at a different rate than outside of the slipspace field. Inside the shield world, hours could pass, meanwhile outside in the rest of the universe, days or weeks could have. It also enabled the Forerunners to create cryptums, basically giant stasis pods that would allow a living Forerunner to exist within it in perpetuity, basically stopping the progression of time entirely. Or on the flip side, and unfortunately for the primordial, be able to create a time prison where entropy could be run in fast forward, forcing the primordial, or whatever occupant is inside, to experience billions of years of entropy in seconds. Conceptually, the dimensional control layer is the interface layer, where advanced manipulation of space-time allows you to isolate, distort, or insulate local reality. Slipspace and hyperdimensionality exist because the neural physical layer laid out the laws of physics and the rules of reality that allow it to exist. Layer 3 is the conventional physical universe. It is exactly as we see it around us: the Newtonian relativistic physics, the observable matter and energy, classical causality, the world we live in, the 3 dimensions of space, and 1 dimension of unidirectional time. All conventional life and physical systems exist here, conceptually almost identical to the application layer, where the written code plays out as a lived reality and exists as a subset of the dimensional control layer. The 3 spatial and 1 temporal dimensions of a conventional physical universe are one of a many nested hyperdimensions of the dimensional control layer. And finally, layer 4 is the synthetic subsystems layer. You can consider this as being practically any computational system in the real world. These are constructed information systems and computers built atop the material world, and is dependent upon physical reality but is increasingly complex, and the normal laws of physics may not directly apply to entities within that system. For example, gravity doesn't particularly matter to an AI within a computational system. Machine code is energy, not really matter, but alas can only exist due to the laws of physics that have been laid out in the previous layers. And that fundamentally lays out the cosmological layer model of the Halo universe, a fully structured framework on how the existence of the Halo universe and its grand cosmology can exist within a bounded framework. And it's clear to see how each layer is directly dependent upon the existence of the one beneath it. Computational systems cannot exist independent of the material universe, the one in which we exist, which itself cannot exist independent from the hyperdimensions of the dimensional control layer. It is a subset of the hyperdimensions, and that layer cannot exist without the neural physical layer laying out the rules and framework upon which it exists. And it cannot exist without the source layer feeding energy directly to it as the fundamental, foundational, and functional basis of the Halo universe, with all of its fundamental forces unified into a single unified field. And it's at this point that I want your input and comments on the cosmological layer model. From my view, it's not just a thematic framework, it's a functional blueprint of sorts. Most fan theories, in sci-fi universes in general, are thematic interpretations. They connect dots and explore narrative meaning, but this feels different. This cosmological layer model isn't just interpretive, it's functional. It explains how the universe operates at nearly every scale, and in the following parts I'll use this model to help connect Halo's time travel paradoxes, domain behavior, flood metaphysics, gravemind persistence, AI corruption, Forerunner architecture, and the precursor extinction and return in one elegant, scalable, internally consistent system. And I hope through this process you'll come to see, as I do, it's not just an analogy, it's the architecture the universe appears to be built on. And until next time. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, kindly tap that like button, and if you're not already subscribed and want to see more stuff like this, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future uploads. Pop a comment down below telling me what you thought of today's video, or if you want me to cover something specific in the near future. I want to take this opportunity to thank and give shoutouts to my patrons and YouTube supporters: Spartan10148, my singular contender class Ancilla, the triumvirate of minds within my installations Metarch, Falcon, Jordan, and Poseidon, my 7 installation monitors Sophia, Ashley, Esoteric, Spartan1029, Chris, Orion, and Shane, the crush of sub-monitors Legion, Ryan, Lebrat, Spartan0137, Element 0, J3, Cult, Evermore's, Personal Devil, Scion Esports, Phantasma, Ashton, and 191 Shaken Lightbulb, my fleet of Strato Sentinels, my most loyal of enforcers, and every single one of the awesome people supporting the channel over on Patreon. My Tier 0 Transcendent YouTube members Spartan137, again, Maury, Jimbo, and Balaz, and all other YouTube members keeping my installation functional on that glorious vacuum energy. I cannot thank you all enough. Shout out to John because... And if you like what I'm doing here, consider supporting the channel on one of the support links in the description to net yourself some tasty merch and help keep the channel going. Take it easy everyone, and find peace in the domain.